Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol yihiyeh b'dvarei. Amen. Okay, Givaldic. So let's jump in. I apologize to those who are going to be watching the recording again. The SD card enabling the regular video to work has not yet arrived. Hopefully, Be'ezras Hashem today, and then tomorrow we'll be back to the regular quality. I apologize. We jump back into Likutei Moharan Amud Yomi. We are smack in the middle, Mamish, of this incredible lesson. And before we begin to continue, this morning's shir is sponsored by Jason Kaplan in honor of his parents Martin and Judith Kaplan and his wife's parents Avinoam and Faye Sharabi. Much appreciated, Jason. Thank you. Also sponsored anonymously B'Schus Shidduchim for Klal Yisrael singles. We should hear Yeshua's, Be'ezras Hashem, and Simchas, and B'Schus Yitzchak, Gedalyah ben Ilanit and Ilanit bas Miriam. Also sponsored by Zev Klein, Nishmas, his parents, Rivka Bryndel, Bas Tzvi Simcha, and Ya'akov ben Yisha'Yehu. The Neshamas should have an aliyah in the schus of our learning together, and it should be a schus for all of Klal Yisrael and all the names mentioned. So we jump back in Be'ezras Hashem. We're taking a look at the beginning of Ice Vav. And yesterday, without doing a whole review all the way back to the beginning, this is quite a lot, but yesterday we had learned that the Tikkun HaKlalli that we've been speaking about, which is the Tikkun of Klallius Halavin, which are the Shasa Loisases, which correspond to the 365 veins and sinews that carry the blood that flows throughout the body, blood which is correlated to Dam Nida, blood which is the aspect of the stained garments, blood which is the aspect of clouded malchus that separate between Kutsha B'Richu and Shchintei. So the incapacity, like the Rebbe said, the difficulty, the challenge of fixing up all of the lavin and the pratim of all the lavin is rectified all the while that a person is working on the Tikkun HaKlalli, which is a bechina of Shmiras Habris, which is going to be the aspect of the Gid HaKlalli, Vayaged Lachem Es Brisai, the ultimate Gid, right, that is encapsulative of all of the other 365 lavin that ultimately are all rooted in this, what's called Yesod, right, because the Midah of Bris is the Midah of Yesod. And the Rebbe had told us that this is the essence of getting close to Hashem, is this area of life, is Tikkun HaBris, is our moral purity in this particular area with all the challenges that we have in our generation. This is the final barrier and the ultimate barrier, because when a person has managed to rectify that area of life, so that's the aspect of the SHIURIM va'aviyeschem elai. We're just speaking about the Gula, right? That's the ultimate fixing, with all of its associated elements that we've been learning throughout the sefer. The humility mitzad echad, right, of shakai, of being able to respect boundaries, flipped by, and we learned this a number of times. I was actually reading through the Stream of Consciousness document yesterday, and just being able to do a bit of a chazara, through that. And we've encountered this concept a number of times now about the dual aspect of the humility / confidence of Shmiras Habris, right? On the one hand, there's a tremendous humility of being able to respect boundaries and to be able to enter into and accept the tzimtzum of what one is allowed to do and what one is not allowed to do, despite the apparent desire and lust and urge. And on the other hand, there's the aspect of tremendous confidence. We spoke in Torah Chof Ches, in Torah Chof Zayin rather, about bris being connected to boyaz, right? Boy ois, boy tukva. We spoke about confidence that's associated with that area of life, which is the opposite of shame and the opposite of a person feeling low about oneself. And it gives a person dignity, and it gives a person back their tselem elokim, because it's what demarcates between a human and an animal, right? This is Tikkun HaBris. This is the ultimate aspect of a SS Chemal Kanfin Isharim. When a person has the aspect of Nesher the Ruach is v'lei kama oid Ruach be'ish, and that's a reference to Tikkun HaBris. When a person manages to rectify that aspect of Nesher, the Avi Eschem Elai, then Hashem says, you can come right into my arms. Hashem says, come and enter into my embrace. And the Rebbe told us, when a person has this aspect of Tikkun HaBris rectified, then a person has something called Parnasa B'li Tairach. then a person's livelihood flows without much effort. That's the aspect of man lechem and hashamayim, and we spoke about that aspect of derech hanesher bashamayim v'haman kezera gad, right? White seed, which is the aspect obviously relating to tikkun habris, tipa chibarta, etc. And this is what enables a person to live in a state of mind, which we're going to learn today, also correlates to a concept that we've also had in previous lessons of masa umatan be'emuna, where a person not only in their internal state is involved in masa umatan in the context of emuna, so that they don't try too hard or they're not too anxious about it because they let it flow, but it actually flows. Meaning it isn't just a subjective experience of the person themselves being in a state of the Yaakov Avinu consciousness we spoke about in the past of Yeshli Kol, even though he might not have everything, but he feels like he has everything. That's Ezu Asher Sameach Be Chelkai. So it isn't just an internal subjective experience of what one has, which renders one an Ashir, even though the bank account doesn't necessarily display those numbers, because the Rebbe says no, it's true objectively as well, meaning the internal shift of Maso Matan Be'emuna that comes as a result of Tikkun HaBris, which means that I let go of my control. That's what it is, right? It means that I am willing to be mevatel myself, right, to a higher framework. That's the aspect of getting out of koich ba'otzim yadi asali esachai lazeh, and a person realizes ki ata pa'alta kol maseinu HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're the one who's doing everything. Sheishes yamim ta'aseh v'asis te'aseh malacha te'aseh, like Lubavitch Rebbe and others teach, right? Gedalyah te'aseh malacha. A person should feel like their work is just being done for them. It's not. You don't have to worry about it. Hashem's got you. Hashem is taking care of us, right? And a person feels that masu matan be'emuna, that will lead to parnasa v'litayrach. But all of these elements are bound up together and ultimately bound up within the Tikkun HaKlalli of Shmir Sebris. And then we learned that beautiful remez of lo yisaychlu al adam, lo yisenachashu, lo yisayinenu. All right, lo yisaychlu al adam is a message about Pgam HaBris. Dam is Pgam HaBris, where the tipa chivarta turns into dam nida, and it's the dam bris, but in a negative sense. And that's the aspect of, well, al adam, so lo yisaychlu. So then there's going to be problems with parnasa, problems with sustaining ourselves if there's al hadam, and we're causing dam nida between the shechina and Kodesh Baruch Hu as a result of the shasagitin that are all wrapped up into the aspect of bris. And then lo yisenachashu. So Hashem says, well, lo yisaychlu al adam, lo yisenachashu, because a person who is transgressing this lo yisaychlu, right, al hadam, and a person is in a state of anshe damim umirma, like we learned yesterday. So l'senachashu, what's that going to cause? That's going to cause the bite of the Nachash. The bite of the Nachash, the bite of Amalek, the bite of bitterness. We spoke yesterday, right? And I mentioned about how Mondays everybody hates because it's the beginning of a work week, and somebody was listening to the shir on his way to Buffalo. He was going to the cave of Tzaddik, and he stopped at a gas station. He walked in, he looked at the big sign on the wall, and on the bottom right-hand corner it said, "Love your Mondays." Like he was, so he got a message from Hashem at a gas station along the way to love our Mondays, right? But otherwise, sinachashu, we get bitten by this snake. The snake that tastes dust everywhere he goes, the snake that loses joy for life, the snake that looks at a world through the eyes of Esav of Malchus, Sitra Achra, Shivcha, Bisha, Isha, Ra, doesn't see a Malchus that's shining with the presence of Hashem, the perspective of Yaakov Avinu, Malchus to Kedusha, the four Alephs, right, going back to Torah Chav Ches. He sees Aleph and Nefulin. He sees maybe there's godliness somewhere up there, but we're all the way down here in the mud. Mi Bisha La Havitava, right, going back to Chav Ches. And because that will eventually lead to Sa'inenu, which is a reference to time, right? The fortune tellers, a reference to time, which is an aspect of itim l'taiva, but itim l'ra. And a person genuinely comes to feel that there are bad times. There are times that are fundamentally need to be deleted from the code. There's nothing that you can do with them. Yeridas that a person can't find Hashem in. And a person starts to feel about themselves, I'm fundamentally bad, and there's no way that I can change, there's no way that I can grow, there's no way that I can elevate, there's no way that I can become transformed. Okay, that's what we had learned yesterday, and then the Rebbe wrapped it all up into Yaakov Avinu. That Yaakov Avinu, who was involved with Machsoch machsof halavan, which were the white strips, right, of the wood that he used to help the animals mate, right, and give birth to all these different kinds of flocks, had the aspect of Tikkun HaKlalli through Reishis Oini, and therefore he was Yoshev Halim, which is an aspect of Shemayim. Vayim Techem Ka'ayhal Hasheves. Hashem spread out the sky, the sky like a tent, which is the aspect of Lechem Min Hashemayim. Okay, so let's continue with Oizvav. Says the Heilige Rebbe Oizvav, B'chol zman shelo tikin Tikkun HaKlalli, all the while that a person has not yet rectified the Tikkun HaKlalli, and a person with their actions is still presently causing a stain, a kesem, dam nida, blood on the clothes, which the clothes is the bechina of malchus, but bechina is dam nida. So then speech is forbidden. I'm going to see what this means. Bebechinas ne'elamti dumia. The Shechina is talking. It says ne'elamti dumia. David HaMelech is Shechina, Malchus. Ne'elamti dumia. I fell silent. Ne'elamti dumia. Sheme'ilu adamim nasa bechinas dumia. From dam comes doim. This is similar, if you remember, to Torah Vav, right, where we wanted to get out of the dam, right, if you remember, the dam shebachol hasmali shebalev, the bechina of ekya b'chsaras panim, right, so it was aleph and aleph hey and aleph hey yud and aleph hey yud and hey, which is gematria dam, right, because ekya was b'chsaras panim imenu. It's really good to do chazara, right, on these things, and that's how a person is in the state of prior to tshuva, koydem tshuva, and then we wanted to turn that dam into doim, right, doim, what's the ultimate tshuva? Getting embarrassed and not responding, right? So here you see a very similar construct, that when the dam is in the chol asmali shabalev, over here is not necessarily talking about in the context of somebody who's shaming us or somebody who's trying to attack us or oppose us, which we learned about in Torah Chav Ches, and also going back in Torah Chav Beis, the same idea of the misnagdim, right, of those who are against and those who don't venerate the tzaddikim and those who don't appreciate this ultimately redemptive path to reveal all the secrets. So those who are against that, to remain silent. But over here he's speaking more generally. The dam will cause daim. Ki ikra dibur tali b'tikkun HaKlalli. Because ultimately speech is reliant on Tikkun HaKlalli shuba b'chinas. Now he goes back to the simple reading of that pasuk, vayaged lachem es brisa, right? And he has informed you of his covenant. Now we learned the word vayaged prior to be a reference to gid, right? Vayaged lachem es brisa, to tell us that there are shasagidim, and the bris is the gid HaKlalli, because vayaged lachem es brisa. But over here the Rebbe connects on a simple level. Bris is correlated to dibur. And so speech depends on bris. Prior to Rebbe Shimon leaving the world, it says in the Zohar Kadosh, the Chevraya Kadisha, the holy students of Rebbe Shimon, would say to each other, Al titin es picha lachti es b'sarecha. They would quote the pasuk, do not allow your mouth to cause your basar, to cause your flesh to sin. They would tell each other, don't speak, be silent. Ki Rebbe Shimon ayakeshes habris. Rebbe Shimon knows that tzaddik is side olam, yesayid is the midah of bris, tzaddik is mandanat bris. It says in the Zohar Kadosh, tzaddik is synonymous with tikkun bris. Person could have everything else in Yiddishkeit, but if they don't have this, they're not a tzaddik. Could be a big Talmud Chacham maybe, right? We have to know about the nature of their Torah, but they're tzaddik, they're not, right? Tzaddik is mandanat brisai. Rebbe Shimon was the tzaddik par excellence, right? He was literally keshes habris, right? In his day, they never saw a rainbow, right? It says, right? And that's why on Lag BaOmer, one of the minhagim is, right, to shoot a keshes. And Rebbe Shimon was in place of the keshes. Keshes is a collectivity of all the different colors, which is the aspect of the midah yesod, which is ki chol b'shamayim of haaretz. It's called kol because it's the collectivity of all of the different energies ranging from chesed to gvura to tiferes to netzach to hod, which all consolidate themselves in yesod, just like the entire functionality of the human body and all the DNA and everything else all gathers itself into the tipa. of the male, right, which is ultimately going to contribute the toar, right, and the functionality, so to speak, into the, or the tselem, you can say, into the demus of I'm never sure if it's telem and demus or demus and tselem, because some svarim have it flipped, but you understand what I mean, right, into what the female is providing, right, which is always the guf, which is the kli, right. So kol is the aspect of the consolidation of all the different midas, and that's the rainbow, right? And that's really what HaKadosh Baruch Hu means to say when HaKadosh Baruch Hu shows the rainbow. He made a kabbat, he made a bris with Noach. That's what it is. It's the ice bris. What's the bris? That he will not destroy the world, come what may, right? That's the aspect of the rainbow. But in the time of Reb Shimon was that rainbow. Reb Shimon was the proliferation of all of the elevated colors. Reb Shimon was what the bris is. And therefore, Rabbi Shimon haya keshes habris, the bechinas vayaged lechem es brisa, hainu klalius hagidim. He was this. But Tikkun HaKlalli, when in a certain sense Rabbi Shimon leaves the world, and therefore there's no longer that presence of Tikkun HaKlalli, as a dibor aser, so then dibor is forbidden. Bechinas ne'alamti dumia, bechinas alti tenes picha lachti es psarecha. Umishu medaber oz, and someone who speaks in such a state, Tikkun HaKlalli, when the Tikkun HaKlalli is not rectified, hu oiver al loy selech rachel ba'amecha. Do not allow there to be a slanderer walking in your nation, because hu hailech rachel megalaside, he goes and reveals the secret where the state of secret revelation, which is the coming together of Yesod and Malchus, there's afrashusa bein kutchabrichu shchente. And so Dibor, which is Malchus, cannot accurately express what should be expressible in the connection between Dibor, Malchus, and Yesod, right? Yud Sod, right? Which is the sodos of what hovers just beyond our experienceable realm. Hagama bris causes for there to be a departure, right? Of, like Yeshayahu explains this very, very deeply, causes for there to be a departure of that realm of meaning from the realm of expression. And that's exactly what Pagama bris is, right? In a normal situation, in a healthy, proper situation, a husband and wife, so a husband is, let's say in this context, meaning, the aspect of hashpa, and the wife is the aspect of expression, right? Because she will take what the husband gives her, and then she will, in her womb, work that into a fetus, bit by bit, stage by stage. And then there's the full expressibility from that which was prior ethereal in the aspect of the masculine, which was just kazera god lava, and it's libuna damaycha, but it is, you can't do anything with it. It's just transcendent. And then it flows down in such a way where it can come down into this world. And that's why Malchus peh, right? Malchus is the aspect of speech. Speech is birth. All right, my good friend I just spoke to yesterday, David Weinberg, has a brilliant book called Birth of the Spoken Word. Right? Word is speech. I'm sorry, yes, word is speech. Also, it's very early in the morning. Speech is, if I make sense ever, it's a miracle. But speech is birth. That's what speech is. It means to say a person has all kinds of thoughts in their mind. To be able to bring it out into clear dibur is a huge tzimtzum. We learned about Rebbe Nachman would sit in his chair sometimes for hours before speaking, agonizing, trying to bring down these. He said Likutei Moharan is the lowest form he could possibly bring these ideas. Like to find words and to be it's a painful tzimtzum speech. Painful. That's why I like writing much more than I like speaking. So I find speaking very, very difficult. Writing I enjoy much more because there's messinas. I could weigh my words. I could write with precision. I can't speak with precision. I try, but when I write, I can write. Speech is very, very difficult. It's a tzimtzum. Because you're trying to take like the bechina of Zera Gad Lavan, the bechina of Libuna de Moicha, right, which is white, it's colorless, it's just, and you're trying to channel it down into limitation. So when a person doesn't have the aspect of Tikkun HaBris, so then the Dibor needs to reflect Malchus that's separated from her husband, where it's not a time of expression. Things can't be accurately expressed when a person is not in Tikkun HaBris. First of all, for the reason that we're saying, because you don't have the connection between Yesod and Malchus, Kedabai, as you need, but also because a person is, like we said, is not in the right frame of mind. It's a bechina of goizlav, right? Goizel avivi imai. We learned yesterday. A person's brain is not all there. A person doesn't see reality clearly. A person is stuck in the mindset of the Nachash that only sees bitterness and bad. So any declaration made from that state of non-mind is precarious and is not reflective of the truth, because a person is seeing the world through the skin of the Nachash, the scaly reptilian skin of the Nachash. That's what a person sees. So we're having a piece of advice: don't make any declarations when you're stuck in this state, right, of brain rot and brain fog, because it's not an accurate representation of what reality actually is. So al titin is pithalachtias b'sarecha. What is the most fundamental declaration that a person usually makes in that state of mind? Mi bishalai havetava. Going back to Chavches. I can no longer do tshuva. I'm so bad. This world is so rotten. Right? I'm stuck. Oh yeah, because if you look at that all day, the world is a rotten place. Yes. But there are other things that are going on in the world, No, but if a person's stuck in that, so Dibor, he says, Dibor is aser. Don't make any vows, don't make any pledges, don't make any. It's just, this is not a time for that. Now, the main thing is to rectify Tikkun HaBris. Then, when there's a yichud now between the aspect of expressibility, which is the feminine malchus, as well as the masculine essence, so then things will flow again. Then malchus will leave its state of dunya, right, where it's not expressing godliness, it's not expressing anything, just careful with the camera, and then all of a sudden, everything will change. The world becomes a place of meaning, and we're able to speak. So, Abel B'Yoyim de Rabbi Shimon, in the days of Rabbi Shimon, Hava Amar Chad l'Chavrei. Each one would say to the other, Psach picha. Yes, open your mouth and speak. Ki kisheyesh Tikkun HaKlalli shu keshes habris, azay hadibur mutter. When there is Tikkun HaKlalli, which is keshes habris, then dibur is mutter. Then you can speak words. That because the words will be accurate words. The words will be coming from a place of Emes. The words will be coming from a place of deeper, of nuance, as opposed to just seeing the darkness, seeing the bitterness, seeing the blackness, seeing the nachash, seeing the itim l'ra and not the itim l'toiv. That's what it does to you. It drags you down into despair. This is Amalek. Asher karcha baderech. The word kar is carry, right, which is pagam bris, and it's also sadness. Karcha, cooling us down. This is not a Dvar Torah. This is Emes La'Mikai. I'm just telling you, this is the facts of life. It's not a suggestion. Rebbe Nachman, I'll say again, never began a Torah with Lefi Aniyas Daiti. Every Torah begins with Da. These are not suggestions. This is Emes La'Amitai, cutting to the core of every kind of Emes you've ever learned. This is it. And this is what the Rebbe is telling us about this experience of Pagam and Bris. Bitter, 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 bitter. Bitter and dark. And mind-numbing. And preventing us from ever being able to get to the true truth, which is, by function of being true, reflected in the Lashon HaKodesh for truth, which is Emes. I will not tire of repeating this again and again. Aleph to Mem to Taf, which is a truth of nuance, which is a truth that includes Taf, Alma de Biruda, but it also includes Aleph of Alufa Shalom. And that when a person either rises to the top, again, going back to Chof Ches, which is so remarkable, right? And looking down, you can see that everything is really an Aleph, or if a person should never sink all the way to the top, right, which is rock bottom, and then finds the Yud there, right, or in the context of the first 10 letters, that's the way that we set it up, and finds the Yud, and then the Yud brings him back up to Aleph and flips everything else, whether it's, Bi'it Arachishenu L'Chatchila B'di Eved, the Tzaddik or the Baal Tshuva, whatever it is, ultimately, the Emes is HaKadosh Baruch Hu is present. All hope is never lost. That's the deepest Emes. The deepest Emes is Ein Shem Yesh B'Olam Klal. Rebbe Nachman, who was the Tikkun HaBris She'ein Kamayu, right? Who was Rabbi Shimon B'Dairei from that standpoint, who was an Adam Naki Adam Oid from the time that he was a little child to the point where he said, if the Gemara didn't tell us not to say Gir Be'ena de Sitna, right, because it's never a good idea, right? The Gemara Kedushin tells us at the end, right, about a tzaddik who said Gir Be'ena de Sitna and then gets attacked by this terrible, this terrible Satan who let him go in the end, but etc. Rebbe Nachman said if it wasn't like not advised to say that, I would say Gir Be'ena de Sitna. Like I'm on that level. Eventually said a woman is like a man to me. Like I have no, he just lost all. He didn't have. He was a tzaddik, mamash a tzaddik. In his second marriage, it sounds strange to some. He married her on condition that they would not be together, because he just wasn't in that Indian at all.
Tough is in such a situation.
So you have to, right, I know that. Yes, well, no, it's not a Shein in Misurim Labia, it is Misurim, yes. So you have to understand how they structure that. Like I said, it's a complicated thing. Maybe it wasn't a tonight, I don't know if it was a tonight in the Kedush, whatever. I'm not getting into the details, but just again, an indicator as to who this person was. So from such a person comes Ein Shem Yesh B'Olam Klal. Right? Meaning, in other words, from a person we actually learned this in Torah, was it Torah Tes? Maybe earlier? Right? Yeah, Torah Zion. Kuloi Zera Emes. Right? Remember what the Tzaddik told us over here? Going back to Torah Zion, Oz Gimel, Kia Eitzah Shemekabel Mehem from the Tzaddikei Emes, Hu Bechinas Nisuin V'Zivug. Right? Their eitzas, their teachings are like marriage. Etc. But by the tzaddik, it's kuloi zera emes. And here he's telling us this is the emes. In the time of Rabbi Shimon, go back inside over here in Torah Chavtaz. Psach picha. They would say, open your mouth, speak. Which is a phenomenal thing, because it doesn't mean that they necessarily had attained the level of Reb Shimon, but they were allowed to speak all the while that they were mekusher to Reb Shimon. Because the Rebbe already told us in another Torah, only tzaddikim could be mizgara b'rashayim. But the Rebbe then told us, even people who are connected to the tzaddik could be mizgara b'rashayim. Because if you're saturated with the energy and the consciousness of a tzaddik, who is a tzaddik yesod olam, who is a shomer habris Tikkun HaKlalli, then even we who are not yet, let's say, at that level, we are just transmitting his energy. Bebechinas yesh oimrim gewalt, right? Eben toiv yesh oimrim chaloin. Remember, we learned in Torah Tes. There are two kinds of people. Some kind of people are inspiration sources in and of themselves. They're mechmatshim. And that's called Yesh Oimrim Eben Toiv, that the table was lit up by its own light source. And the Yesh Oimrim Chalai. And there are others that get light, but it's not their own light. They get light from others. When you get light from others, so then also Yesh Oimrim. I'm making a reference now back to this Torah. Right? Yesh Oimrim, there are those who can speak Psach Picha, right, because Eben Toiv, right, because they have their own light source. That's the Tzaddik Emes. That's a b'china of Rabbi Shimon. That's a b'china of Rebbe Nachman. But yesh imrim. But you can also speak if chalain, right? If you're the aspect of a window. And over here, when Rabbi Shimon was alive, they would say to each other, "Psach picha." Ki ksheyesh Tikkun HaKlalli shu keshes habris azaya dibur muter. Ki adamim kranis staknu, because then the dam is rectified. But b'chinas dam ne'ekar v'naseh chalav. The dam breaks down v'naseh chalav, and it transforms into milk, which is the aspect in this context of the garments becoming free of the stain of dam nida. V'naseh chalav. The aspect of your clothes shall be white at all times. And then yizamercha chavod v'lo yidam, so that we shall sing Hashem's kavod v'lo yidam, without silence. What's kavod? Kavod is b'chinas begadim. We learned that kavod is the aspect of the garments, the b'china of malchus. Rabbi Yochanan kar lema'anei mechabdusei baruch shem kivod malchusai. Kavod is b'chinas begadim. Sheneslabnin mi b'chinas madua adam l'lvushacha, that became whitened, as opposed to being clouded, opaque, shutting Hashem out, the aspect of dibur that's not able to express anything, meaningless speech. They become clean. So then, when you have kavod, which is an aspect of the zimra, the aspect of singing, going back to Torah Gimel, the aspect of holy musicians, whose singing comes from the shtei tziparim, right, to kedusha, the two holy birds, which is the opposite of lashon hara, right? Remember, the opposite of lashon hara. Lashon hara was the aspect of people who are always seeing the bad in everything. That's lashon hara. The holy, and they were called unholy musicians, right? And we grappled with that, like makesher, lashon hara to music. But we said because the Torah Bazamra 282 tells us that what music is in Rebbe Nachman's in Rebbe Nachman's corpus and writings, is seeing the nekudos tovos, is finding the good points that makes the melody. And you find one note you want to play, then you find another note you want to play. That's what a melody is. You're selecting notes from all the other notes. A person who's saying lashon hara all the time is living in a world of unholy music, because he's choosing to select the unholy part, the points where Hashem's godliness is not shining. What's the tikkun for him? He needs to bring shtei tziparim, highest iris, right? Two pure live birds. Because that aspect of what was called holy music is rectifying that worldview. And so how amazing is that, right? Where over here in the tikkun, you have Laman Yizamercha, Kavod, right? Which is the aspect of Kavod Malchus. That's a song, right? That's singing. And then V'lo Yidayim. And then we don't have to be silent anymore. And from the standpoint of the Pegam, going back up to the paragraph, what was the lashon of the Pegam? Is Loi Selech Rachel Ba'amecha, right? Which is a reference to a Mesaper lashon hara, which is the opposite of this music. Are you guys with me? Yeah? This makes sense? Right? Which is the opposite of a person who's seeing the good. This is seeing the ra. Right? That's called lashon hara. Loi Selech Rachel Ba'amecha. And so Mamela, in the tikkun, we have to have a reference to a song, because singing, right, meaning finding the good, is the way to counter this mindset of Pegama Bris, which is the aspect of thinking, literally, if you think about it, that our covenant with Hashem has been broken. That's Pegama Bris. Right? If you think of it, there's no greater Pegama Bris than Christianity. Right? Because Christianity is literally Pegama Bris. The whole idea is that we've lost our covenant with Hashem. Right? Of course. Right? Christianity, right? So from their perspective, and there's no greater Pegama Bris than that. But the crazy thing is that each of us have a little Christian somewhere inside, right? Because sometimes we feel like we feel that way. Sometimes we feel that way. Sometimes when we're stuck in the darkness of the filth of the venom of Amalek, of the Nachash, then a person falls into the mindset of Eis Ra, and from the standpoint of Eis LaMilchama, a person loses all contact with Eis L'Shalom. When a person is in Eis LaKarnatua, so then a person loses touch with Eis L'Ntaya. P'gama bris. The flip side of that is a person who no matter what, never ever lets go of that. And even in a moment where they slip, because there are going to be yeridos, right? That's part of it. It's not Tikkun HaKlalli for the tzaddik Emes means perfection. We're not talking about perfection. I want to underscore that point. Tikkun HaBris means a person who is in the fight. And then there are yeridos that come along. And then we learned in Torah Chav Beis, maybe. No, Torah Chav Hey. They're not really yeridos, right? You're just getting to the next madrega. And this is part and parcel of the journey. We spoke about the klipos, right, that are at every level, and the ability to see through them and realize that it's all HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, that Hashem is present in the obstacle, the aspect of
Dimion and Sechel.
Right, Dimion and Seichel, right, pushing past the Dimion, rising from madrega to madrega, the aspect of Yerida Tachlis Aliyah, in some sense, that it serves as an indicator as to where we are in the previous phase of the journey, how entrenched in our essence has it become that we are one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and all of this. That's called a person who's on the journey. And then bit by bit, hopefully, a person who's on that journey in the right way, which is very, very delicate, that a person should have all the right elements and the right balance, right? And then a person actually changes. A person progresses level after level. And then a person is able to see the world in a different way. And a person doesn't fall into this fatalistic, nihilistic, depressive consciousness that all hope is lost. Because a person is filled with the spirit of the tzaddik Emes, which is the bechina of Yisoid, which is coming down into our malchus, so to speak, which is the kula zera Emes of the Eitzah of the tzaddik, who's screaming and screaming and screaming still, right? V'lo yidayin. Ein shem yesh ba'olam klal. And we're able to hear that. And it's able to literally pervade every layer of our psyche, not just in the ace, in the positive itim, the 14 times of positivity, which is the bechina of su'u yedechem kodesh uvarchu es Hashem, yad, right, is the 14 times, right? Where it's a bechina of the elevated yadayim, the yadayim of brachas l'reish tzaddik, right, of putting our hands on the head when we give a bracha, the hands of faith, the hands of netilas yadayim, right, of su yedechem kodesh, dripping with the water of umala arz deas Hashem kamayim liyam echasim. Even in a time of koich v'aitzim yadi, right, which is the other yad, the 14 itim l'ra. When a person's stuck in masomat and shaloi be'emuna, and a person's stuck in the opposite of nekicha payim uvar levav, where it's dirtied hands, a person is still connected to this fundamental perspective that even here, it's called Boki B'Shov. A person is an expert PhD. A person is, the greatest professional in the world. He's a Boki. Rebbe Nachman used the word Boki. You have to be an expert. Boki B'Shov. A person goes to medical school for 8 years and becomes a Boki in an area of medicine. It takes study. This is not a simple thing. You read it on the surface like, oh, big deal, never give up. Oh, that's a big deal. because people give up all the time. And if people don't give up today, they'll give up next week. And if people don't give up next week, it'll be next month. And if it's not next month, it'll be next year. People say, what do you need Rebbe Nachman for? And then they turn like 68, and then they hit a crisis. And then all of a sudden, because I see it all the time, and I'm a young man, they all come running to Breslov. All that, I'm telling you, people you wouldn't have dreamed would ever open up anything the furthest, they're self-sufficient, they don't need it, they're successful, Breslov is for losers. Everyone's a loser. Meaning, in other words, we're human. So eventually everyone realizes that they're a loser because we're little children. And eventually a person's gaiva runs out, and you run out of fuel. And then you're running on fumes. And then it's like, I need oxygen. And then it's like, oh, wait a second. Oh, there was somebody, I once heard somebody say that, just like Rebbe Nachman gives good chizuk. This is the way it goes. So the Rebbe says, listen, if you can have it, merosh, then you already have it. It's built into the foundation. Then there is no crisis. The Rebbe wants us to avoid crises. He says, guys, I want to give it to you at the outset so that you don't run into that issue, because it's built into your psyche, the consciousness of Shmiras HaBris. It's built into your psyche. You can always speak. Your whole life you can speak, because you're in a state of Yichud Kudsha Baruch Hu Shchinte, of Yichuda B'Tedira. You're already in a state where you have the wherewithal and the expertise to know how to handle yourself in a moment of darkness. You have that. You're a Boki in it, but you have to be a Boki in it. And life, by the way, is the classroom. Life is the classroom. And our circumstances are the test. But this is the curriculum. If you don't have the curriculum, you're sitting in a classroom, you're not going to know what's going on. Rebbe Nachman gave us a curriculum for our generation. It is a curriculum. This is not optional. I don't know how people live without this. I don't know how they live. I'm telling you, I don't know how they live. I would not be here today without the sefer. I mean it literally. Likely. Imagine a world where you just flip a switch and all the consciousness of Likutei Moharan that we've been like, what did the world look like before? People it's a different universe. It's not a sefer that you sit and learn and don't learn. It's a technology. Like my good friend Joey Rosenfeld always says, advanced technology. The world hasn't caught up to this tech. It's consciousness shifting. It changes everything. This is called Tikkun HaBris. A person lives in a world of music, even when everything is silent. Rebbe Nachman would dance, and he would say, our dancing, he said, actively dance, but the metaphor he told his Hasidim, on one occasion he said, we are like people who are dancing to music that only we can hear. And to everyone else who can't hear the music, we look like crazy people. But it's only because they don't hear the music. We hear the music. Statement A, right? Statement B, the Rebbe said, we are like people who dance without music, and because people see us dancing, they bring the music. So we don't wait for music to dance, we dance, and then the music arrives. The man is a mercha kavod, that the Rebbe was living in a world of kavod. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusay. The Rebbe lived with Hashem. He wanted us to do the same. The Rebbe lived with a world that's full of meaning and full of purpose, and where there's a master plan that's guiding B'Chlal and a master plan that's guiding B'Frat. And it's all founded, like we learned yesterday, on Olam Chesed Yibana. It flows forth from love. It flows forth from intimacy. It flows forth from infinite invitation and minimal, pressure or shame or guilt. It is all love. It's all love. The Rebbe Mamish lived that way. That was the music. And Mamela, everything that he saw around him and everything that he experienced in his own life was interpreted through that lens. It's all good. It's all, that's called Boki B'Shov, Boki B'Shov. Going back to Torah class again, because these two Torahs are so connected, this is the aspect of the tzaddik yisoid oilam. Yisoid is not on the attic of the house. Yisoid is the foundation. It's called Boki B'Shov. The yisoid is buried in the earth. You don't even see the yisoid. It's a Moshe was on a ma'id, of Asha al Pnei Adama. Moshe Rabbeinu is the ability to show, like his burial plot did. The Chaver are learning in the nighttime, and everybody's encouraged. There's a night kollel learning Likutei Moharan Likutei Halachas Be'ir. You can speak to Rabbi Yehuda for details if anybody's interested in joining here. The Chaver are going to learn. It's at the end of Tar Zion, where you learn over there. In Tunyana, they're learning. The reason why Moshe Rabbeinu was kaver was in such a way where Eliyoinin nidmu lehem lamata and tachtoinin nidmu lehem lamala. Rebbe Nachman says that Tzaddik Emes shows that tachtoinim, that Hashpa is able to reach even the people who are tachtoinim, people who are in a low state. Nidmu lehem lamala. Moshe Rabbeinu's message is, spoiler alert, I'm sorry, you'll get to it, right, is to teach those people nidmu lehem lamala. With a little bit of imagination, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. That's the tzaddik yisoid oilam. That then becomes a foundation to build. Oh, and then there's a thing called Boki B'Shov. There's a thing called, there's more to do. There's madrigas to reach. A person doesn't sit the whole day and say that they're fine as they are. That's not Breslov. Breslov is Boki B'Shov she'ein kamayu. There's so many eitzes and things to do. Maspik. And a derech halimod of how much a person has to learn every day, and esvodidus, and taking chatzos, and levels and levels and levels and levels of madrigas that the Rebbe demands that. That's Boki B'Shov. There's also Boki B'Shov. So then a person go back inside has the bechina of lemad yizamercha chavod v'lo yidoin. So kavod ze bechinas tamnida. I'm sorry, kavod ze bechinas begadim shenislabnin me bechinas madua adam lulu shech me bechinas tamnida. That the malchus is purified and cleansed. The malchus, the lowest most, the outermost garment, is seen as being an aleph, is seen as representing Hashem's presence. So va'az v'lo yidoin. So then there's no silence. There's no silence. Then the lavnunis, the whiteness, the chesed, the translucence. We spoke about kasnas R, right? With an ayin, with an aleph. Lavnunis b'hadanim bechinas v'noizlim min levanayin, flowing down from levanayin, min libuna demoicha, va'az hadibur muter, bechinas psach picha. And then, boom, a person encounters a world that's communicative. A person is able to encounter nature, which is described by the Baal Tanya famously in the beginning of Shar Yichud Ve'emunah, based on a teaching from the Baal Shem Tov, La'olam Hashem devarcha nitzav b'shamayim. The person looks up at the Shemayim. It's a big tikkun, by the way, for those of us here who get up early before it's sunrise. And here it's easier to do because, like, at a certain point in the winter, no matter when you get up, hopefully it's before the sun rises. But you daven shacharis, and you're supposed to go outside. It's very important when you come out of the building to look up at the sky. A big tikkun in the R Yaakov. Davka, to look up at the blue sky to start your day. Rebbe Nachman used to ask his people, right? Did you look up at the sky today? Looking up at the sky is a big Indian, especially after being up that whole process, and then look up. And so when a Jew looks up at the sky, you can see a sky, or you can see the words Yehi Rakia B'Seichamayim. So the Baal Tanya writes, that's what it means, La'olam Hashem Devarcha. The words Yehi Rakia are nitzav b'shamayim. The question is, what does a Jew see? When there's Pagama Bris, when the Midah of Yisoid is separated from the Midah of Malchus, then you don't see any dibur. You don't see any communication, because Hashem is all the way up there. We're all the way down here. There are Alf and Nefulin, and from Aleph to Beis is a huge distance. From Beis to Gimel is a huge distance. From Gimel to Dalet is a huge difference. I'm all the way down here. He's all the way up there. Nature is nature. I'm down in the dump. My life is hopeless. That kind of thing, right? So then there's no dibur. There's just teva. But But when a Yid is living with the consciousness of the tzaddik Emes, who's the tzaddik Yisoid Olam, who's davuk to the Shechina always, who's a bechina of Dagim Shabayam, like we learned. Dagim is the bechina. You remember we learned that Dag is the tzaddik, or not the Torah base. And why is it B'yam? Like I told you, aside from the Zohar Kadosh, it's called Zivuga B'Tedira. Right? It means that the tzaddik, the Dag, is the bechina of Yisai, is constantly in the waters, the female waters of Malchus. It's right. It doesn't separate. So the tzaddik is constantly living in a state of Zivuga B'Tedira, is causing to manifest down in the lower half of the Eitz HaChaim, between Tiferes and Malchus, what always already exists between Chachma and Bina, which are called Shrein Re and Dalam Sparshin, which never ever separate. But down here, Tiferes and Malchus separate, and it's the shift from horizontal to vertical. All this is incredibly deep. But the job of a tzaddik is to unify Kutchabrichu and Shchinte so that it should be revealed below what is revealed above. When a person is makusher to this kind of tzaddik, so then v'lo yidai, the world isn't silent. The world reveals its letters. The world reveals its communication. A person literally feels Hashem speaking to them through their lived experience. And I've seen this to be the case. The more you look for it, the more you'll find it. The more you're aware of it, the more you'll see it. The degree of hashgacha pratis that I encounter, just because I learned this stuff on a weekly, I was just thinking yesterday, I really have to start writing these things down. My wife knows, nobody else knows. Things that are mavil al araya, constantly. I was joking to a friend yesterday, it's like the matrix is breaking down. Like it's not even, it's just so obvious. I don't know if, everyone else is feeling that, but in my life, daily, I give a small example just because of a crazy hashgacha that happened yesterday. Well, two hashgachas happened yesterday. First, that which I posted on the group, right? That 2 days ago, in Shira, I was mentioning Kasnas R with an Aleph, Kasnas R with an Ayin, right? Which is a chiddush that came down when I mentioned the Aleph is Klal Yisrael and the Ayin is the Ayin Umas Olam. It just came down in the moment and I shared it. And then I'm learning Pardes Rimanim from the Ramak for a few years already, and I open it up to where I'm up to. Boom, that next paragraph, he says the same thing, right? Kasnas R, Kasnas, and the Ayin is 70 nations, and the Aleph, like, okay, Geval, anytime you see that a tzaddik said what you suggested, it's a beautiful thing, but the next day, like, that's where I'm up to, pretty wild. Shabbos afternoon, I don't know why, we just, in conversation with my kids, we were going through the different units of time, right? How many seconds are in a minute, how many minutes are in an hour, how many hours are in a day, how many days are in a week, how many weeks are in a month, how many months are in a year, how many years are in a decade, and so on. Just, I don't know why we got into that. And, we were going through all the different units of time. Yesterday, also in Pardes Rimanim, up to the next piece in that parak, boom, going through units of time. How many seconds are in a minute, how many minutes, wild stuff, strange stuff. I don't know how to explain this stuff, but hello, so when it happens once in a while, it's one thing. I'm talking about constant. Because if you're living with this consciousness, you're inviting it. You are inviting it. You'll see it. You'll see Hashem winking at you the whole time. And you realize that Hashem doesn't speak the way that we think or would love for him to speak. He speaks through life. He speaks through experiences. And he's there. He's there. It's just, you have to develop a chush to be able to sense the there-ness, because it isn't a WhatsApp and it isn't an email. And it's not a phone call. But a person really begins to feel this, but the only way to feel it is to be open to it, and the only way to open to it is by learning Torah from tzaddikim amitim who were speaking the language of Dalet Alfin. Then once you begin with the consciousness of a premise that Hashem is here, then you'll find him. But if a person lives with Pagama Bris, where there's a breach of covenant, where Hashem may as well destroy his world because it's all hopeless, right? And mi bishala have tava, and I can't do tshuva, and I can't become a tzaddik, and I'm hopeless, and I'm stuck. So then Hashem says, listen, and telchu imi bekeri. So avani, it's a mirror. Hashem silcha, keri, daika, right? If you walk with me with Pagama Bris, so then yeah, you shut me out of your life. If it's not a punishment, it's just that's the consequence. That's the way that life. You stick your hand in the fire, you get burned. It's not personal. It's just the way it is. Hashem should bless us to continue to connecting to tzaddikim shomer habris. Hashem should help us, Be'ezras Hashem, to be able to live in the consciousness of Tikkun HaBris, the consciousness of the Dalet Alfin, and to be able to look through this mirage of the world and to find the loving presence of Hashem, who is constantly attempting to communicate with us and reach out to us and embrace us. Have a wonderful day. And we lost 5 minutes. So his the whole hour. So.
ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי, האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שעל